Is Top Gun 3 harder to crack in some ways than Top Gun Maverick?
No, it's already in the bag.
You cracked it?
Yeah, I already know what it is. I already know what it is.
Easy.
Yeah, no, wasn't hard. I thought it would be. Yeah, I thought it would be. And I go, and that's a good place to go from, is you walk into the room going, come on, what are we going to do? And Aaron Kruger pitched something, and I went, actually, and we had one conversation about it, and the framework is there.
Prepare your ears, humans. Happy, Sad, Confused begins now.
Hey guys, it's Josh here with another edition of Happy, Sad, Confused, and yes, you knew I was going to have to do something special for Mission Impossible. It's the final reckoning after all. Well, it's the final reckoning on the screen, but it is the first reckoning between me and Christopher McQuarrie, the amazing filmmaker behind the last 4 Mission Impossible movies. He is the main event on Happy, Sad, Confused today. Some light spoilers, that's why I held it to today. This is a treat of a filmmaker conversation. Okay, more on McQ, as we call him, in a second. Updates, as always, June 1st, New York City. Come on out, guys. And all this information is on our Patreon, patreon.com/happy, sad, confused, discount codes, merch, all that cool stuff. Check it out if you can, and support, because it lets us do more stuff. Anyway, June 1st, Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Danny Boyle, all joining me live on stage. It's going to be a really fun night talking 28 years later. Very anticipated, long in the making sequel. Danny Boyle is back. I am beyond excited for this one. So link is in the show notes for tickets. And then Los Angeles, as I've been saying, come on out, LA. I don't get out there that often for live events like this. This is your chance to see me do my thing with no less than Gary Oldman, living legend, talking slow horses, the Dark Knight trilogy, Harry Potter, True Romance. I'm going to talk as much as I can about his entire career, because this dude, call him a dude, this legend, this unparalleled performer, has done it all, and I have such reverence for him. He's a sweet guy. He's done the pod a couple times. It's going to be a blast. June 3rd. Again, information is in the show notes. Okay, let's talk Mission Impossible for a second. I've been doing a lot for this one. I was on the carpet for the New York premiere. Check out clips with me and Tom Cruise and the cast from that one on my Instagram page, on MTV's page. That was really fun, really cool. Always amazing to talk to Tom. And this is really, I love these filmmaker conversations, and McQ is so well spoken. If you know him, and you probably do if you listen or watch this podcast, he's had quite the journey as a filmmaker. Way back when he was quite a young man, he won an Academy Award for writing The Usual Suspects. And then kind of found himself, not kind of, he did find himself in director jail, directed a movie called Way of the Gun. Pretty good movie, but did not click, and kind of had to claw his way back. And through his collaborations with Tom Cruise on Valkyrie, eventually directing Reacher, Jack Reacher, that film, and then kind of being given the reins to the Mission movies, has really risen to the heights now of blockbuster filmmaking. What they do in these movies is without compare. I think it's fair to say the practical stunts, the locations, the scale, the way they do it. And McQ is very smart and cool about, I don't know, opening up about the process, the very unusual process by which they make these Mission Impossible movies. There's a lot in this conversation. It's a deep dive into Mission, their process, his collaborations with Tom, lots of cool stuff about upcoming films they're working on, Top Gun sequel, a musical, Les Grossman, a Days of Thunder sequel. All of that is in this conversation. And stay tuned to the end, because we do talk about the Superman movie that Christopher McQuarrie was going to do with Henry Cavill. Some really cool stuff in there. Okay, so can you tell I'm excited? I'm excited. Enjoy this conversation, a long time coming, with Christopher McQuarrie, aka McQ, and check out Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And like I said, sorry, one more thing. There are some light spoilers. It's not like we go deep into spoilers, but this conversation is best watched or listened to after you've seen the film. There you go. All right, enjoy my chat.
Christopher McQuarrie, McHugh, we're doing it. It's happening.
We're here. We're here.
I've been chasing you for a while. It's been my own mission impossible to get you on the podcast.
Can I just tell you, it's nice to be chased.
Thank you for submitting to the chase. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Very
we were at the New York premiere last night. Another insane accomplishment. I hope you're starting to exhale. I know it's pressure, but it's good pressure.
Yeah, the exhale comes from the fact that when we finished Top Gun, when we were promoting Top Gun, we had already started shooting Dead Reckoning. When we were promoting Dead Reckoning, we were already shooting Final Reckoning.
Right.
So you didn't get the same feeling that you do on this one, where you don't have to be at work on Monday.
Yeah, Dead Reckoning Part 3. Wait, no, we don't actually have to do that.
It's not hanging over your head like this movie was last time.
Talk to me a little bit about, look, I've seen you in these giant contexts like, Spanish Steps, New York premieres, you're at Cannes. You have had such the journey as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
You were in director jail. You were going to quit the business.
Oh, yeah.
You were done. Do you take stock in those moments where it doesn't get bigger than the stages you're on now to know where you came from?
Oh God, yeah. There was a moment on this movie in particular. I was on this deck, looking up at a 1,000-ton steel, 360-degree rotating, fully submersible gimbal over an 8.5 million liter tank, all of which had been scratch built for this purpose, and stepped outside of my body and looked back at myself and said, "What are you doing here? How did you end up here?" It's not anything you set out to do. It's a very valuable lesson I learned when I was in director jail. What ultimately led to getting out of it was that I stopped trying to control the outcome. I had a picture in my mind of the kind of movies I wanted to make, the kind of career I wanted to have, and nothing was happening.
Yeah.
As soon as I stopped focusing on execution and not result, as a friend of mine explained it to me in a golf analogy. You focus on your swing and not where the ball is going.
Right.
You are constantly surprised at where you end up.
That's great, because that really leads into kind of what I want to talk to you a lot about, which is when we've talked a little bit about this, the very unusual process that you guys have established over the course of these 4 films.
Yeah.
And it's almost this embrace the chaos, find the film, see what it's going to be, let it tell you what it's going to be.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
That no one else has figured this out. And I don't know if you would even recommend other films do it the way you do it, but somehow, why does this process, without necessarily sometimes always a locked script, where you're filming sequences before you even know where they are, why does it work for Mission, where all these blockbusters collapse underneath?
We never stop. We never give up. We are very honest with each other about what we're doing while we're doing it. You're constantly evaluating. You shoot a scene, you shoot a line of dialogue, you shoot one actor's coverage in a scene, and you step back from it and you look at it and say, never mind what I meant to say, what did I actually say?
Right.
What did we communicate? And we either alter it to get the result we're after, or we go with what is clearly more organic and working for the story. We don't write roles and then go looking for an actor to play that role. We cast actors and we tailor the role to them. And that's why when someone came up to me after watching one of the earlier cuts of the movie and said, "God, everyone in the film is so perfectly cast." Well, yes, if you write a role specifically for that actor, then they will be perfectly cast every time.
Yeah.
That's not something where we go in knowing what we want, beyond knowing that we want to have affinity for that character.
Right.
We want that character to have power. We want that character to be likable, even if that character is unlikable. We want to like not liking that character. And the big stuff, the submarine and the aerial and all of that, we're very, very, very specific and very rigid in terms of our planning of those sequences and developing that technology. So the assets, the things that are really expensive, are first the assets and then the time that it takes to shoot them.
But you're malleable in where they even end up. Correct me if I'm wrong. Some of your biggest sequences were intended at the beginning of one film and end up in the middle of another.
Yes.
That's just, I mean, it's insane to me. It works.
You just can't panic. You have to be able to pivot, and you have to know, how do you do it responsibly?
Yeah.
You can't be cavalier about it. And you can't, I know the outside impression must be that, oh, they just give them whatever they want, they do whatever they want. No. And, you know, any more than, not that I am comparing myself to him as a filmmaker, Stanley Kubrick, the way Stanley Kubrick had the control that he did is he was actually extremely frugal.
Right.
He shot his movies quite cheaply.
Yeah.
Everybody, the myth becomes that, oh, he had this amazing deal, he could do whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick understood that if you kept doing what you wanted and your movies didn't make money, you were not going to get money to make another movie, even if you were Stanley Kubrick.
And I think what he wisely spent money on often was time.
That is exactly right. Stanley Kubrick understood how to save money everywhere else so that he could buy himself the time. What Tom and I recognize in our process is, the bigger the movie is, the more it has to make.
Right.
And the more people it has to reach, the more universally accessible the movie must be, globally accessible the movie must be. However, we're also not compromising on the stuff that we consider to be the substance of the movie.
Sure.
Which is where you're feeling the narrative tension in these movies. You're feeling the push and the pull between exposition and action, between emotion and spectacle, and how those things are fighting with each other, and that's what leads to the kind of unique tone that this franchise has.
And that conflict, that friction, even applies to action versus exposition, dialogue versus silence.
Yes.
And it's so funny. Like this film, I mean, I've seen it twice. More striking than even all your others. Even it's the extremes. It goes in both ways. There's a lot of track to lay down. There's a lot of exposition you got to do. You got to do it. There's a ton of silence in this film.
Yes.
Like the most extensive, indulgent in the best possible way, silent sequences. And there is that, like, it's just fascinating to me, you as a screenwriter, that it seems like your heart is in the silence now.
My relationship with dialogue has evolved 180 degrees from where I began. You know, starting with The Usual Suspects, that's a story about storytelling.
Yeah.
It is all dialogue. And over time, I came to realize two things. One, that the style of filmmaking, particularly coming out of that era, that there's a dialogue became synonymous with writing.
Right.
And this
is how you prove I'm a good writer, by
exactly.
overwriting the shit out of it.
And I watch film geeks who are kind of dismissing things as this is the greatest thing ever because of this showy monologue, and the writing in this movie is, you know, I know people were very upset when Top Gun got nominated for screenplay because they were just laughing at the kind of very obvious overt dialogue.
Right.
The dialogue to me in that movie is the most necessary and obligatory stuff imaginable to get the point across in as few words as possible for a global audience who's reading subtitles.
Right.
And the substance of the movie, for me, with very few exceptions, does not rest in the dialogue. Same with these. If you look at Mission Impossible, most of the dialogue is exposition.
Yeah.
It's very, very little of it is anything but. It's a genre movie. It's a spy movie. It's very, very particular.
Yeah.
By the way, same thing with James Bond. It's all exposition. Yeah. What I'm most proud of in this movie are the scenes in which they aren't exposition.
Right. And it's not just action. It's looks. It's emotional.
Looks. Yes. It's composition and behavior.
Yeah.
That that is the evolution of Rogue into Fallout, into Dead Reckoning, into this movie. And I'm just excited to now take everything I've learned from this franchise, unburdened by everything you must put in this franchise, to go and make, my silent movie.
I was literally just going to ask, have you and Tom discussed doing an actual silent movie? Like whether it's like literally no dialogue or almost no dialogue?
The script that I have, that I brought to Tom at the start of this process, it was the movie I was going to go off and do before we did this. And now Tom's attached to it. He has fewer than 500 words in the whole movie.
Is this broadsword or is
broadsword? He's a fairly stoic character. He says almost he's all through. It's all done through action, behavior, and the character with whom he is partnered in the movie has fewer words than he does.
Fascinating. I always think back, I remember like the Coen brothers were going to do a completely silent movie at one point.
Yeah.
I always wanted to see that. So this is tickling my...
It's very, very hard. It's really interesting. Audiences don't like exposition, and they're right not to.
Yeah.
And there's an art to presenting exposition. You can hide vegetables in a lot of sugary stuff. I just try to get through it as elegantly as I possibly can, and in a way that you can absorb the information.
Just because you brought a broadsword, did I read? Is Cavill attached to that, or someone else? You're still looking.
You read that.
Okay, but we don't know officially. Okay.
Don't believe anything you read about any of that stuff. That's just my relationship with the world of film speculation and film expertise online. I just warn everybody who speaks with any certainty about film when not working in film.
Right.
You are immortalizing your presumptions.
Yeah. Well, to believe what I read, you're making 10 movies with Tom next year. I mean, I know you're working on a lot.
We're always working on.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We're always working on something. We're working on something right now.
So we talked about the set pieces. I'm curious. So where were they? Were they intended ever to be either part of Dead Reckoning Part 1 or other places in this film, the submarine sequence and the biplane?
No, they were always. The structure of this movie was fairly constant from going all the way back to Dead Reckoning. Once we knew we were opening Dead Reckoning with a submarine, we knew, and Eric and I knew very early on that's where Final Reckoning was going to go. We were going to return to the wreck of that submarine, and then it just became a matter of, okay, now how do we do it in a way that it's something audiences haven't seen before.
It's interesting because, this obviously is very much linked with Dead Reckoning, yet tonally it's a very different movie.
Yeah.
It has a much, there's a weight of the past. I mean, we've had weight on the past of Fallout, et cetera, but this one even more so. It is, as you guys keep saying, it is a culmination. It is has nods, overt and subtle, to the past 7 films. Again, I'm just curious, the evolution, because, I don't know, Dead Reckoning had a positive response. It had some mixed response as well, too. Mm-hmm. The box office, I know, wasn't necessarily maybe what everyone hoped for. Mm-hmm. Is there a reaction to that affected what this movie ended up being at all?
Oh, yes, there was, because look, we take all that stuff very, very seriously. And I'm not one to sit there and say, the audience didn't get it.
Right.
That's
these movies you have to listen to the audience.
That's it. You work for them. And I said, okay, what didn't work for them and why? It would be very easy to say, Barbenheimer, and just blame it on that.
Right.
We did not factor that into our thinking. We looked at the film very, very critically and said, okay, where could we have gone better? Where could we have done better? How could it have been tighter? How could it have been simpler? And it could have been at the expense of other things that were important to us. We then said, all right, let's try to make a shorter movie out of this one. We pivoted and deconstructed the entire movie, and I built a nonlinear version of this film and shot it to be nonlinear in order to move certain critical scenes earlier in the story, particularly Mount Weather, the scene with Ethan and the president, because that's where the journey
Right.
Ethan's journey kicks off and um, and it was very clear as soon as we assembled it, did not work. So Tom said, just make it linear. I made it linear, did not work. And when I made it linear, why it didn't work is every scene you put first was a scene where they were talking about the entity before you knew what the entity was.
Right.
Which is why we then created that opening, that cold intro that just says, here it is. And that's the big lesson for Tom and I, over and over and over again. There's just a point where you just have to say it. You just fucking tell them. And
we can dance around this all day, but let's just get it. Rip the Band-Aid and make it as entertaining as possible. Put it in Angela Bassett's mouth, and it'll be good.
That's it. And that's why the scene where he confronts the entity.
Yeah.
That scene contains within it everything I insisted could not be in the scene, and contains nothing that Tom insisted must be in the scene. It's a rejection of everything we believed it could or could not be, and we did it 2 days before we locked picture. We just said, "Here's just spell it out, just lay it all out." But I also by then.
Where he's talking to the entity.
He's talking to the entity, but I had also by then made a discovery because I thought it needed to be visual, and was really fixated on the visual nature of it, and was frustrated with the visual nature of it from what I had originally imagined it to be. I'm glad I didn't do what I imagined it to be, because it wouldn't have been something. It would have been noisy. It would have been it would have left less to your imagination.
Yeah.
What I discovered was the essence of that sequence, and what made it work was sound. And the way my sound team had discovered a way to mix that voice, particularly when you're sitting in a Dolby Atmos theater,
Right.
When the movie comes to home media, to listen to that in a really good surround sound system, the entity really gets in your head, and it's very effective. That's one thing, the sound mix. The other is the music that Alfie and Max created 2 days before we locked picture. It was really incredible. They came in at the last minute with that cue that is totally different from everything else in the movie.
When's the movie done? When it's about to come out. When it's ready to come out, that's when you're done. I mean, you take what you can get. It's curious to me, like, his relationship with Gabriel, the backstory of Ethan that you kind of flash back to in Dead Reckoning Part 1, Marie, the character of Marie.
Yeah.
It seems like, was there an intent to go back to that more?
We did. Look, everything in the movie that you have questions about, we shot the shit out of.
I'm sure you did.
And because what matters to us, we hate exposition, but we don't avoid it. We shoot it and overshoot it, and over inform and over include, and then are constantly pulling it back. How much do you need to know? And the truth of the matter was that flash to it at the beginning of the story coincides with a line of exposition that summarizes what that is. And I shot a backstory. I shot a sequence that told you a little bit more about their relationship. And the truth of the matter was that unless I made that movie, it's always going to feel somewhat ambiguous and open-ended anyway. Right. So we just said, screw it. The other thing was, we knew because of the strikes and everything else, we were that much farther away from Dead Reckoning.
Right.
If it had come out the following summer, that would have been different. But there was so much distance on the movie, it gave us the permission we needed to just let Dead Reckoning go and make this a standalone movie.
I know you talked about when Dead Reckoning came out, the idea, among many ideas, to de-age Tom at one point.
Oh, yeah.
So you had mentioned, I don't know if it was flippantly or seriously, like, what if we get Julia Roberts and we de-age Julia Roberts and we have them in the 80s? Was that essentially the Marie character? Is that what you're saying? That was kind of the idea?
That was an early iteration of it, and what we ended up realizing was, if you de-age those three people, if you took Isai and Julia Roberts and Tom Cruise and de-aged them and put them all in the same scene, it would have been as expensive as the submarine. It's so much money to do that de-aging correctly when you have multiple characters in a shot. As soon as I researched the technology, I realized if you're going to do something like this, it has to be awesome.
We've seen some masters try it, and even they've had trouble with it. So yes, I get it.
Well, and what I look at when it works, all I'm thinking is, wow, this de-aging is really good. When you see a character that you've known for so long, be it Robert De Niro, Kurt Russell, Tom Cruise, and you see their younger self in a different context, on digital, not that that's why the bit with the rabbit's foot, we shot it on film. We went back and shot it entirely on film, and we studied the lighting and the camera work on that movie, and did our best to recreate something that was integral to Mission 3. And that helps that when you're looking at the shots that we have of Tom from Mission 3, it doesn't feel out of place.
Makes sense.
It looks like Tom Cruise from that era.
Yeah.
The film looks like Tom Cruise movies from that era.
Right.
And that's why when we did originally have a very elaborate scene of Ethan's past, and we were doing all that research, the understanding was, how do we do everything down to the grain of the film, make this look like, and so I realized, okay, that it would have been, what was the Mission Impossible before Mission Impossible?
Right.
If I'm shooting Ethan's past, if I'm shooting Mission .5, it would have been 1989, and that's how we found Julia Roberts because she was just popping, and we thought it would have been Tony Scott's.
I love it.
Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible, the choice. I can see the movie. It's
Yes, and having worked on Top Gun, learned a lot in terms of studying Tony Scott's photography and watching Joe Kosinski build upon that and remain Joe Kosinski while making a Top Gun movie. But I had a lot of time during that process to go, well, what if we were making the Tony Scott movie? How would you do it? And that would have been fun. I would have enjoyed doing that. So I went from making a 10-minute Tony Scott sequence to making, probably 12 seconds of J.J. Abrams.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I know you're plugged in, you see what the fans are saying. When there was...
I don't.
Really?
I haven't. On this one, I have specifically avoided it.
Well, let me ask you, going back,
Yeah.
I mean, you must have been aware, I would think, when Ilsa dies in the last one, a lot of folks were like, she's not really dead, she's coming back. Did you ever consider, if that's kind of what they want to see, do we,
It's the cost versus benefit. It's the death of essential characters has followed Ethan throughout every one of these movies.
From the start.
Yes. I don't think up until that point a character that resonated so deeply with the audience had died.
Right.
And I know there were people who were dissatisfied with the way it happened, which is where I thought that wouldn't motivate me to undo the one thing that gives Mission Impossible teeth, which is death is permanent.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to bring up, and I hope you appreciate in the spirit I bring it up, is that leaked audio from the making of Dead Reckoning Part 1. That, you never want somebody recording something illicitly. But I will say this, a lot of folks, we already have respect for Tom.
Yeah.
The kind of things he was saying there is who he is. Maybe not that, that was an unusual tone for him. We were not used to hearing that.
Yeah.
But he and you, safe to say, felt the weight of not just that film, but the industry. The industry puts movies like Top Gun, like Mission Impossible on their shoulders.
Yes.
Do you feel that? You talk about that with Tom?
We consciously decided that. We agreed to that. Tom is asked all the time, why don't you do more movies like? Why don't you,
Right.
And Tom answered quite frankly at one point during all that. He's like, look, the industry needs movies like this right now. We made these movies are very hard to make. They're enormously physically, emotionally, and mentally taxing. Factor in a pandemic and 2 industry strikes, what should have been a 2.5-year process for both movies stretched on to 7 years. I didn't see my family for half of that time. Yeah. That put an enormous strain on all of us. You don't see me driving around in a gold-plated Lamborghini. When you make a movie, you don't get paid overtime.
Right.
When the movie goes as long as this one did, we made an agreement very early on that Top Gun Maverick and these 2 Mission Impossible movies were going to be movies that did everything they could to preserve a kind of filmmaking, a kind of storytelling, and a film-going experience during a time when I really feel the industry is, I don't want to say imploding, but certainly receding. And I feel there's a venue now with streaming wherein you can abdicate certain burdens.
Yeah.
And I choose my words very carefully. It's not avoid, it is to abdicate those burdens. Yes, making a movie that has to compete on its opening weekend sucks. That's also an important part of why a movie has the quality that it does and lasts as long as it does. You got to fight for those eyeballs. You don't have to do that in streaming.
Right.
You don't have to do that. The metric by which they measure success on that is completely different and has nothing to do with an opening weekend. I don't begrudge that. I think that's great. Just know that when you're doing that, you're not paying into the system. You're not paying into theatrical. You're getting to make the kind of movie you want to make in the way you want to make it, and that's great. That removes an essential element from the creative process, which is the audience. They are your collaborators, whether you like it or not. You work for them, whether you like it or not. Right. You never reach a place in your career. Tom Cruise, 40 years in this business, as successful as any actor has ever been, should be in a position where he can do creatively whatever he wants. And can. And will not.
Right.
Tom Cruise subscribes to the fact that we work for the audience and our job is to get them to come into theaters. It's why we test our movies, which a lot of people think is sacrilegious and a cop-out. And I would say the bigger cop-out is not testing your movie. You don't have to change your movie, but don't you want to know?
Right.
Don't you want to know how your movie's going to be received?
At least the movie that's intended to appeal to as many human beings as possible.
Yes, and test audiences have told us many things where we've said, thank you, no.
Right.
There are other things that test audiences show us and we say, thank God, because I couldn't see the forest for the trees. They're a very important collaborator, and ultimately they are the people who reward us and allow us to go on.
Yeah.
They're also the people you have to dynamite out of their homes to come to a movie theater. And we believe in this medium. That to us, the communal experience and the love of sitting in a theater with 500 people. You will never get the cheers that you got in Top Gun Maverick or in E.T. at home.
Yeah.
You won't. You won't have the same feelings. Watching The Godfather on the big screen, which I didn't see on the big screen until I was in my 40s, but watching that with an audience and seeing the reaction to certain scenes that to me at home were, that's clever.
Right.
And feeling it actually play like a big summer tentpole movie.
Yeah.
Watching John Frankenheimer's The Train recently at BFI,
yeah.
and seeing it play as well as any summer blockbuster, the way they got the humor and the way they felt the triumph of those characters and the devastation they felt at the loss of others. You only get that in a theater. The emotional experience is muted at home. It's something you can never truly replicate. Tom and I quite literally devoted our lives to it, and he quite literally risks his life for it.
Truly.
While we're making these movies. I'll tell you something else
Yeah.
about that recording with enough distance to get away from it. Just to give you a sense of reality, when you heard it and you read the associating copy, close your eyes and show me how you picture the event.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Like, just what do you picture? What do you imagine the event being?
I mean, he's obviously on set, surrounded by a dozen actors, extras, you, and a couple folks who were getting too close to each other. And
How many
set 'em
people
off.
total would you say was that based on your mental
This is
picture?
a trap.
No, it's not a trap. It's
Yeah.
quite literally what
Yeah.
impression did it give you? There's no right or wrong
Yeah,
answer.
no, I was like a dozen, 20, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah. There were 7 people
yeah,
in that conversation, and 2 of them were me and Tom.
yeah.
And it was not in front of the crew. That's how it was reported.
Got it.
And 2 of the people there were people who had specifically been tasked with the health and safety of our crew, and had repeatedly
Not lived up to that responsibility.
not lived up to that responsibility. What you're also not hearing is the 30 minutes of audio that came before it, that led to that.
Mm-hmm.
When the number of times of trying to get one's point across
Got it.
is not finally
The
getting
breaking point
across.
was reached. Yeah.
So context is very, very important, and it's not something you can ever add to something in the age of the internet in real time. But the truth of the matter was there was a much greater context to that, and now factor into it the fact that the person who is raising his voice is quite literally going to work every day and risking his life
Yeah.
for a very expressed purpose of keeping the industry alive. That was not a guy pissed off because his latte was cold.
Right.
And
Or even that someone's in my eye line, which is justifiable.
or, yes,
But
or your yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Other outspurts you've heard, which by the way, you listen to those things out of context and think, oh my God, you make one movie, and you will totally understand.
Yeah, no, I get it.
When you understand the pressure, the pain, the risk, the time,
Yeah.
and the responsibility.
Yeah, and add
crushing.
COVID and everything going on.
You add
Yes.
COVID and everything else going on,
Yeah.
and you can't respond to it.
Yeah.
You can't respond to it. What I am grateful for is that people in the know, people who make movies for a living, understood, A, we've all been there. We've all lost our shit. Every single person. Ye without
course.
sin cast the first stone. But that also the what he was saying was very, very sincere. There was, he was on the phone every night fighting the good fight to keep things going, to
Yeah.
keep things alive. And I was a fly on the wall for all of that. I watched him will that into existence. And then I watched how long it took for people to change, for crews to adopt a different mode of behavior and to take seriously what it was. And it did not matter what you believed.
Yeah.
These are the rules now. And if we want to keep working, this is what we got to do.
Yeah.
It's not really about what is true for you and what is not.
Right.
This is reality.
Yeah.
Reality and truth are 2 very, very different things.
I want to look ahead a little bit. We alluded to some things.
Yeah.
Is Top Gun 3 harder to crack in some ways than Top Gun Maverick?
No, it's already in the bag.
You cracked it?
Yeah, I already know what it is. I already know what it is.
Easy.
Yeah, no, wasn't hard. I thought it would be. Yeah, I thought it would be. And I go, and that's a good place to go from, is you walk into the room going, come on, what are we going to do? And Aaron Kruger pitched something, and I went, actually, and we had one conversation about it, and the framework is there. So no, it's not hard to crack. The truth of the matter is, none of these are hard to crack.
It's the execution.
It's as you start to execute it and as you start to interrogate it,
Yeah.
and as you start why these movies are made the way they are. It's not the action. It's not even the level of or intensity of or the scope and scale of the action, the engineering around the action. It's none of those things. It's the emotion.
I was going to say, what I remember, I remember a lot of things from Maverick,
Yeah.
but it's it's him and Rooster at the end. It's
That's it.
that moment.
And getting to that place, finding the right emotional balance wherein you have a conflict between these two characters. They kept saying, we want more scenes with them together, because they wanted to recreate
Right.
Maverick and Goose, which of course we understood. And your desire is to rush right to what the audience
Yeah.
wants. The minute their relationship is resolved, the movie is over.
Right. Tighten
If
that
they
screw
have-
as much as possible.
Yes, and if they have too many conversations where they don't talk about their problem, you're just like, guys, just talk about your fucking problem already. Just you'd be frustrated with the characters.
Totally.
Tom and I inherently understood that balance, and everyone else around us was pushing for what they wanted in the movie in the micro, and Tom and I were focused entirely on the macro. The challenge of that became, of course, the fact that when you're making a movie, and you can reference other movies when I say this, if your character doesn't like the protagonist, no matter how much you want me to like that character, the rules of movie making say I don't like that character.
Right.
Even if I don't like the protagonist all that much. You're an antagonist. Rooster was always riding the edge of falling into being an antagonist.
Right.
You had to build an entire world around that character so that you liked him despite the fact that he didn't like the guy you're rooting for. That's the bones of the movie that we knew and were always after. We're always pushing in terms of making sure in every scene I feel affinity for this character. I want to like both characters.
Yeah.
And I want to see them be friends. And that's the reward of the movie. It's not finishing the mission. It's
Right.
not. It's not Great Balls of Fire. It's not any of that. It's the ultimate emotional payoff. Much like in the first movie, his relationship with Iceman.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had his relationship with Rooster, but his relationship with Iceman, as much as Iceman was antagonizing Maverick, he was cool, and he was a better pilot, and he was right about everything that
Right.
he was saying. You want to see them be friends. Why the sword fight in Princess Bride works, as good as the choreography is. Yes, it's great choreography. What really makes it great is they're two great characters, and you don't want to see either of them lose.
Right.
You and you want those characters to be friends.
Yeah.
And that's why that ending is so utterly satisfying. Understanding those things, there is no cookie cutter version of that. You have to strive for and fight for and push for that dynamic. I can write it and we can shoot it. That doesn't mean you'll feel it. And we look at it all the time and go, I ain't buying it. Maverick and Penny's relationship ultimately worked when we shot Jen Connolly for a fourth time on a little piece of a bar in front of a green screen. And she improvised a line in the middle of a newly written version of the scene where she said, it always ends the same way with us, Pete. Let's not start this time. When she said that, I suddenly knew how to structure the rest of their relationship, because it's really hard to create conflict between a man and a woman in a movie in which the man desperately needs to go and do what he needs to do.
Right.
How can that character be saying to him, what about me? Same thing with Grace in these movies. How do you create tension in the relationship without having one of the characters be completely ignoring how important the stakes of the movie are? Those are big challenges, and they take forever. Haley's first scene in the movie, we shot 2 months ago. And we shot it after we tested it the first time and looked at it and went, oh, of course, I know exactly what I need to do with this character, and I need to do it in 2.5 minutes. And I am very fortunate in that I work with a leading man to whom I can say,
we need to do this again.
We have to do this scene, and you got to give everything to Haley.
Yeah.
You got to give it all to Haley, and that's going to make her essential to the story. That's how those movies are engineered. You do it by sense of feel. There's no roadmap.
Are you going to end up directing the next Top Gun? Is that a chance? Is that a real possibility? Because Joe's got a full slate too.
Joe, to me, I have given that absolutely no thought.
Okay.
No thought whatsoever. I do, however, I have done a lot of research into how to make a Tony Scott movie. So.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not the sort of director who would be squeamish about, yeah, I get it, I'm making a sequel to a Tony Scott movie. Do your Tony Scott.
Okay, let me just throw out a bunch of these other potential Tom Cruise projects. You tell me which of these are priorities or are likely to happen.
Yeah.
The musical, is that something you guys have really?
Everything is a priority. Everything will, in one way or another, happen. It will not necessarily happen in the time or place you think it will.
Okay.
They're all things we're talking about. They're all things we have ideas about. The conversations we've had about Les Grossman are so fucking funny.
So that's real? I mean...
We're talking about it, man.
Oh
We're
my
having
God.
very serious conversations about it and how best to do it and where, you know, what... It ultimately comes down to what that character is. Les Grossman. Tom will be the
And
first one.
is that the lead? Because he obviously worked as such a side character. Like,
You
is that...
hit the nail right on the head that I was going to. A leading man, Tom Cruise will tell you, a leading man has different responsibilities.
100%. No one knows it better than him.
When everybody's going, oh, why doesn't he do more Magnolias? It's like, well, you're a supporting character in that movie. You are allowed to say the things he says in that
Yes.
movie because
Yes.
he's not the protagonist of that film. He doesn't have the same burden. He doesn't have the same responsibility. Ethan Hunt, a character of whom people can be critical, is on rails. There's so little that he is able to do outside of his responsibilities as a leading man.
Right.
And when you try to push those boundaries, mission instantaneously ceases to become mission.
Right.
That's the line we're always walking is the difference between a leading man and a supporting man, a character role versus a more traditional matinee protagonist.
So that's figuring out, on the Les Grossman side, maybe how he reacts to something else, what you...
We
Okay.
don't even
Okay.
think about the structure. We play with scenes.
Okay.
And Tom is just to be sitting at a breakfast table, not talking about the movie we're making for a minute is such decompression.
Right.
And just riffing with Tom, playing to Les Grossman at the table is just it was one of the real joys of making this movie. It was all the stuff we were doing, planning the future while slugging out the present.
How much work has been done on the Days of Thunder idea of trying to figure out where Cole Trickle is now and the best named character in the history of
Again,
cinema?
totally know what the premise of the movie would be. In 5 seconds, I knew what the premise would be. When and I looked at the response to Top Gun Maverick, and immediately turned to Tom and said, "Days of Thunder." I said,
But not the same, not mirroring what you did on Maverick.
It would be no, because it's a completely different character. It's a different movie. It has a different cultural impact than that movie. So, and all those things go into figuring out how to make the story. All these stories now, everything I'm talking about post Fallout. Fallout, the big thing for me in Fallout was the discovery of just how important emotion was.
Yeah.
In narratives like this, which normally aren't really a priority. Emotion is something you inject into those movies. With Fallout, emotion was baked into every frame. I did not call action on a shot until it was somehow framed emotionally. It didn't matter if it was, you're looking at Ethan Hunt or you're looking at a set of car keys. When we did Maverick, in that earliest conversation with Tony and Jerry and Tom, was understanding what was the audience feeling about the world around them when they made Top Gun, the first movie. I was the only person in that room that hadn't worked on the first film. My only qualification, I felt, in that room was I remembered vividly what it was to be a 17-year-old kid paying to see that movie.
Yeah, let me tell you actually what it was like in the real world watching your crazy
exactly. It's like I know what you guys all meant as artists. I was the focus group in that first meeting, and with many years of distance and 30 years working in movies, at that point 25 years of working in movies, I was able to articulate what it was I was feeling, and said that unless we can isolate what that is for an audience now in 2000, at this point it was like 2008, 2009, and then 2011, and then when I came back to it in 2019, it wasn't until I read the first draft of Top Gun Maverick in 2019, that I was able to call Tom and go, I know what it is. I know what it is. I know what the essence of the movie is. And I know what everyone will think the essence of the movie is. And I told Tom, everybody's going to think that this movie's about Tom Cruise, the movie star, and Maverick the pilot,
Right.
and the end of F-18s, and the end of cinema, the end of manned flight, and the end of cinema, and they're never going to know what it's really about, and I'm never going to tell them, but here's what it is. And Tom said, I totally agree. In the wake of that movie, I then turned to Tom and said, now we got to do that for Mission. And here's...
I mean Days of Thunder or
What's
Mission?
that?
You're saying Mission or Days of Thunder?
For Mission.
Oh, Mission, sorry.
And that's how Dead Reckoning
Got
came
it.
to be,
Understood.
and that's how the entity came to be.
Got it.
This concept of information technology is something we've been talking about for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But it was an intellectual idea that you had to explain its threat to the audience. You had to explain its influence.
But
to
now the world
audience.
was ready for it. They caught up to
By
this idea.
2019,
Yeah.
people were aware of the algorithm, and they were aware of the effect it was having on their lives.
Yeah.
And you could very clearly feel they were beginning to develop an anxiety about it. That replaces the Cold War.
Right.
Because in Top Gun Maverick, you had the Cold War. In Top Gun, you had the Cold War. In Maverick, you didn't. You had to find a different anxiety. In Mission Impossible, the first Mission Impossible is a spy movie just a few years after the Cold War ended, and you could feel spy movies were going, well, what the fuck are spy movies even about?
Yeah.
The essence of what I do now, post Maverick, post Dead Reckoning, is to look at a movie and go, why now?
Yeah.
And what itch does this scratch? What anxiety does this soothe? And that's what this movie, Final Reckoning, was engineered entirely for.
Is there any other character, because this is the luxury of Tom, is he has this amazing pantheon of great characters. Like,
Yes.
I'm curious where Vincent from Color of Money is, or Daniel Kaffee, or Joel Goodson. Are any of those other ones, you must, all the time with Tom, go through the filmography like,
Oh, at post Maverick, I think about all of them. I think about all of them. I think about who would Joel Goodson be, who would, yes, and of course people are suggesting all the time, oh, you do The Color of Money, and he's the.
right.
The difference being where Paul Newman was in The Color of Money versus where Tom Cruise isn't.
Yes.
His
His 62 is a little different than where Paul
62 is way different. The guy is in his 5th decade of making movies, and he just made Final Reckoning.
I know.
Like that's
He's not quite ready for that kind of thing. Yeah,
No.
yeah.
And if you look at John Wayne when he was 52, and everybody loves to compare, or 62.
Yeah.
Everybody loves to compare Tom to how old he was.
Right.
And
John
Wilford
Boyd or
Brimley.
Wilford Brimley, the whole thing, yeah, all of it,
The
yeah.
whole thing. Tom's a very unique specimen, and so it's not an apples to apples any more than, I hate to say it, gender switching is not apples to apples.
Sure.
When you take that movie and you just, you put a man in a woman's role and the woman in a man's role,
Yeah.
it has a different vibe. And you got to lean into that. You have to acknowledge that, and you have to go, okay, well, who am I really making it for?
Right.
And it's also the actor. It's there are no arbitrary choices. You have to put it there, and you have to look at how it resonates
Yep.
emotionally, and you have to acknowledge when, well, it's not working that way. How do we serve it? How do we serve it so that it does? And that's and so if I was going to make a movie about, say, Joel Goodson, in his as a 62-year-old man in this modern reality, what itch is that movie scratching?
Right.
And who is that character? And one of the things that Tom was very particular about with Maverick, and which we talk about all the time with why Ethan is a challenging character. Tom's only big note, his only rule for Top Gun Maverick was, I don't want sad Mav. I don't want to meet
Right.
a guy at the beginning of the movie who used to be Mav, and he's got to spend the movie getting his Mav back. For the simple fact that totally taints the first movie. I know at the end of the movie he went off to become sad Mav.
Yeah.
And that's why when you look at these franchises and how they resolve characters, you got to be very, very careful, because it's going to change the way you watch those other movies. And we were very conscious about it with this, that there was every decision we make represents the conclusion of that character's arc.
Yeah.
Not just Ethan, but Benji,
Yeah.
Luther, William Donlow, Kittredge, and even the characters like Palm and Haley who are in it just for these two movies. They all had to have resolutions that had equal weight and resonance. And now I hope when people go back and watch Dead Reckoning, see when Haley first walks on screen, knowing what her character's arc is. When Palm Clementieff first comes on screen, what her character's arc is. When Degas is on the train talking to Shea Wiggum about whose side are you on, following what his arc is. Those were all things we knew from the very, very beginning of this. And when people were projecting onto those characters where they thought they were going or where they wanted them to go, we had to play the long game and say, just wait for it.
It's been some distance now. What was your Superman pitch? You pitched another story after Man of Steel.
I'll never tell, but boy, it was fucking good. It was fucking good, and it was, Green Lantern was what had come to me. And Green Lantern's a tough one. It's a very
that
tough.
Power. That
it's a very the power is very
the weakness
very challenging.
Is tough.
Yep, and I cracked it, and it was fun, and watching him learn how to use that power and giving that power a flaw,
right?
So that it was not pure invincibility.
Yeah.
There was and it's all there.
It wasn't just yellow, like that was like, you're talking about Green Lantern?
No. Well, the whole the whole concept of Green Lantern is the ring has to be recharged.
Right.
The ring has to be recharged, and that's not a bug. That's a feature. That's the thing that made it. Yes, you have infinite power, but you only have so much. You only have so much battery life, and that can run out at inconvenient times.
Yeah.
That for me solved the whole Green Lantern problem. The costume is another thing, and you can figure that out if you. But here's the thing: I look at any superhero, and growing up, if you had told me that there would ever be a Captain America or a Thor that did not have me laughing hysterically at the character, and how that is proof. Just check your certainty, man. When you dismiss an idea, you're not dismissing my idea, you're dismissing yours. You're dismissing your concept of it. In the same way I was dismissing mine. So I realized, don't worry about the costume, worry about the character, and how do you give that character tension and stakes, and also how do you do it with Superman. And Henry had a take on that, and I suddenly realized how these two characters had amazing similarities, which also allowed for amazing conflict and an amazing universe-expanding resolution.
Now I'm just getting upset.
But I will tell you, the first 5 minutes of my Superman movie, which was imagine you remember Pixar's Up?
Sure.
A sequence with no dialogue that covered that character's.
Yeah.
Okay. The first 5 minutes of the movie was a setup after which you knew exactly what made Superman tick, and exactly what Superman was most afraid of, and why Superman made the choices that he made. And it would have been epic. It would have been epic. In 5 minutes, the scale of the movie would have been absolutely extraordinary. And the other thing, and I hope that anybody who watches this movie, that enjoys the end of this movie walking away, that's the feeling I would want you to walk away from, because that's really what Superman is about. It's about hope, and it's about it being inspiring, and it's and the joy that character created. I don't think you need to live in the shadow of Donner's Superman.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to live in the shadow of John Williams' score. But you do need to recognize that movie captured better than any other with respect to everyone that has followed. it captured better than any other the heart of that character.
Yeah.
The problem with Superman is that when they constantly are trying to create bigger and bigger and bigger obstacles for a character with infinite power. Donner understood, and all the best sequences in Superman understand that Superman's greatest obstacle is himself, followed potentially by Green Lantern.
All right, to be
It's
continued.
all right there, guys. It's all right there, just sitting there waiting for somebody to make it.
I appreciate the time, man. I'm glad this happened at the right time for Final Reckoning. Congratulations. It is like all 4 of these movies, but this one especially, the degree of difficulty, how you guys approach it, what you're trying to do with these. This is an audience movie. I saw it in IMAX last night. I've seen it twice. See this movie.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time, man.
Really, I appreciate it.
Appreciate
It's
it.
great talking to you.
And so ends another edition of Happy, Sad, Confused. Remember to review, rate, and subscribe to this show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm a big podcast person. I'm Daisy Ridley, and I definitely wasn't pressured to do this by Josh.